You're listening to a podcast by Way Collective, a contemplative community for love and liberation in Santa Barbara, California. This recording was the conversation starter at our dinner and dialogue gathering on January 22nd, 2025. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, well, over the next 5 weeks, we are going to look at 5 thresholds we can cross to enter into the second naïveté. Remember, the second naïveté is how we move toward consolidating a simplicity or innocence on the other side of complexity. You know, after life gets difficult, or we endure pain, or we bring a critical lens to our own spiritual tradition or heritage. And as the philosopher Paul Ricoeur said, after that, we long to be called again. Tonight, we're going to focus in on crossing over the threshold of thought, making room for the unknown and kind of engaging contemplatively with our own stories and narratives. We'll begin with a quote that we looked at the retreat a couple of weeks ago. Richard Rohr writes that the most common human responses to a new moment are mistrust, cynicism, fear, knee-jerk reactions, a spirit of dismissal, and overriding judgmentalism. These are the common ways the ego tries to be in control of the data instead of allowing the moment to get some control over us and teach us something new. And as we've spoken about before, the antithesis to these common responses is meeting the moment rather with awe and learning to surrender to that awe. So this is a good place to begin, because contemplation teaches us not what to see, but how to see what we behold. And this includes how we see our thoughts or how we think about our thoughts. In essence, tonight's invitation is to learn to transform how we think. I love that Aaliyah read a little John O'Donohue tonight to open us up, because he is famous for saying, so much depends on your mind, how you see yourself, who you think you are, how you see others, what you think the meaning of life is, how you see death or belief or God, darkness. Beauty is all determined by the style of mind that you have. Your mind is your greatest treasure. We become so taken up with the world, with having and doing more and more, we come to ignore who we are and forget what we see the world with. The most powerful way to change your life is to change your mind. When you beautify your mind, you beautify your world. You learn to see differently. In what seemed like dead situations, secret possibilities and invitations begin to open before you. So this is the heart of the teaching tonight. You know, John O'Donohue goes on to say things like, ask yourself questions like, what are the 7 or 8 recurring thoughts that I have all the time? And then he asks, then think, what are the 7 or 8 thoughts I've never even thought of before? He says if you do this discipline, then something new begins out of that curiosity. And the point I think he's trying to make is, rather than believing every storyline you come up with right out, become curious about your own mind. And that curiosity can lead you to a surplus of possibilities rather than one singular foregone conclusion. See, when we're curious about our thoughts, the tapes that play over and over again, and whether or not those are actually true, we can actually learn to problematize our own perceived beeline negative conclusions about any given situation. Are any of you here familiar with The Work by Byron Katie? Yeah? It's a super simple and helpful paradigm for inquiring of your thoughts that exemplifies the challenge tonight. So to begin, you isolate a statement for inquiry. She says to start with who or what upsets you and why, recalling a specific situation. You know, she even says to capture your stressful thoughts on what she calls a judge your neighbor worksheet, using short, simple sentences. Then you're going to ask 4 simple contemplative questions, one at a time, to drop into the depths of yourself and listen and wait, hoping that the answers will meet you in your inquiry. So the 4 questions are actually pretty simple. The first question, is it true? The answer to the first two questions is just one syllable, yes or no. Be still and find your honest yes or no as it arises to meet the question. If your answer shows up as a yes, move to question 2. If it's a no, then experience that no for a moment and then move to question 3. Second, she invites us to consider if your answer to question 1 is yes, ask yourself, can I absolutely know that it's true? Take this opportunity to kind of look again and shine the flashlight on that moment in time and see what reveals itself to you. Then there's question 3, and this is a good one. How do you react, or what happens when you believe that thought? So she invites us to kind of close our eyes and witness the feelings, body sensations, and behaviors that arise when you believe that thought. Notice and report the answers to any of the following. What images do you see, past or future? And what emotions or physical sensations arise as you witness those images? How did you treat the other person? How did you treat yourself in that instance? Do any obsessions or anxieties begin to appear when you believe that thought? These are great questions. And then there's the most powerful question, the fourth question. Who would you be without that thought? So closing your eyes, you can kind of return to the situation, take a moment to reflect, observe, and experience the situation again, this time without the thought. Who or what would you be without the thought? How would you see or feel about the other person? Drop all your judgments and notice what is revealed. And through this process, she says, then you work on what's called a turnaround, turning the original phrase inside out to notice if an alternative conclusion is as true or perhaps even more true than your original thought. And that's it. It's really a beautiful exercise I'd encourage you to try if you feel stuck in a certain thought pattern or conclusion. And I want to give credit to Byron Katie. Her website, thework.com, is great, and all of these instructions are from her site, so go check it out. But again, what this process does is, it problematizes the tapes that play in our heads, the incessant or insistent thoughts, and the conclusions we have made about those thoughts. And we do this for the sake of moving further and further into freedom from our natural reactions to events in our lives that Rohr named earlier. Mistrust and cynicism, fear, dismissal, and overriding judgmentalism. And as we do this kind of work, we build up a new thought muscle memory that teaches us to be still and curious about what we've come up with. I love that another community member of ours has a bumper sticker on her car that says, "Don't believe everything you think," because that could be a summary of this teaching, and it's so profound and important to understand. Sure, believe some things that make you feel whole and at rest in the world. Believe those thoughts that call you home to yourself and give you more and more freedom. But don't believe every thought you think. The first naivete would say something like, "I am my thoughts," or "all my thoughts are true." But a second naivete person turns it around and says, "I'm not only my thoughts," or "I'm more than my thoughts," or "I don't know which of my thoughts are actually true, if any of them, if I'm being honest." This is a second naivete perspective. So what comes in at that point is a crossing of a threshold into unknowing. And a place of unknowing is a beautiful place to be because it captures the openness of the human spirit that's necessary to engage compassionately and in a posture of welcome with oneself and with others. Please understand, I'm not saying that unknowing means we know nothing, right? We don't need to apply the 4 questions from the work to needing directions on a drive toward a destination. We're not trying to problematize when you need to go left and when you need to go right. In many matters in our lives, confidence and even certainty can be very helpful. As in, I'm certain that this chair that I'm sitting in right now will hold me up when I sit in it. Or I'm confident or certain that this map will get me where I'm trying to go. Those things are important. But where these contemplative exercises should be applied and where they really work to open us up is when they're applied to situations where we are being judgmental, fearful, or anxious toward ourselves and others. And to be as blunt as I can about this, I would say that our thoughts create the realities we live into. In every moment of our lives, we are perceiving something. Experience runs all the way down. You can't turn it off. And those perceptions come to us in feelings or bodily sensations. They come to us in emotional content or the accompanying thoughts. And we're going to go into feelings and emotions in the weeks to come. But we're beginning with thoughts because our thoughts dictate the stories we tell ourselves about our feelings and emotions. And if we're not conscious, aware, and careful about how we think about things, we can get into what we call stinking thinking, which can lead us down some difficult and dark paths in our mental health journeys. So here's a good mantra for us to hold on to during this series of conversations. Every thought will pass. Every emotion will pass. Every feeling will pass. And this is so vital because what that means is that they aren't actually ultimate and that we are more than our thoughts. So why do we tend to give them so much power? Again, the stories we believe create our reality. Have you ever asked yourself, sort of kind of like taking a step back when you recognize a thought, who or what is the one that just recognized that thought? It's a vital question. We are more than our thoughts because there is a consciousness within us that is aware of the thoughts themselves. And this is good news because if you, like me, have ever been driven toward anxiety or panic or pain or negativity or cynicism or what have you, it also means that if we can change the way we think, we really can learn to turn toward awe and wonder and surrender to that again. And that is the second naivete. When we can traverse the wilderness of our own mind and grow in our curiosity toward ourselves, toward all our different parts, and find an openness, a clearing that allows our thoughts to arise and fall without the need to repress them or overindulge them, then we've got it going. In fact, I remember a couple years ago now speaking with a community member about some family that had coming over for Thanksgiving. And they said, I don't really know what it is, but it's usually kind of an anxiety-inducing situation hosting all these different people with their different views. But this year, I'm sort of calm about it. And I can't pinpoint why, other than the fact that I've been practicing each week at Way Collective how to turn to wonder, how to not fix or save, and I just don't feel the need to change anyone's mind anymore. And I was like, wow, that's great, But you know what I also wonder? I wonder if this person didn't need to change anyone's mind anymore because they had changed their own mind. Perhaps they had encountered a different way to think, and that made all the difference. So my hope in opening up a conversation about this is that each of us may be gentle and generous with ourselves, that we might learn to welcome every thought that comes our way because we know it is an invitation to include it and stride more deeply into peace. May we become more comfortable with unknowing and find ourselves surprised by the ways in which we can turn around the tapes that play in our heads into more positive outcomes. And in doing this curiosity-inducing contemplative work, may we ground our lives in a sustaining love that helps us come to know how thoroughly loved each of us are, just as we are, with the current thoughts that we carry, that we might be free to give ourselves to a second naivete. Let's chat about this. Thanks for listening to this podcast by Way Collective. To keep up with our community, you can subscribe to this podcast, go to www.waycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram at @waycollective. Peace and every good, y'all.